I'd like to preface this by saying, I know a lot of people might think this is fake, and this statement is me trying to trick you, because this really happened, and I really don't know where else to go. On this computer, I'll explain later, all the normal stuff is blocked, Facebook, email, etc. So I tried every single site imaginable, leading me here. I think this is a good place for it, and I'm not in any immediate danger, so I think it's okay to write this story out in completion. So, let's do introductions. My name is Ty. It's not short for anything. Not Tyler or Tyrone, just Ty. Nice to meet you. I live in the southeast of Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia, but closer to Bucks County. Living in more of a rural area, I've always been fascinated with the woods and nature in general. One thing I've really been interested with is survival. Like living on your own, no commodities or luxuries of modern life, fending for yourself. Reading up online about this, I found this program called Outward Bound. I don't know if it operates in other areas, but the Outward Bound groups in my area go out into the wilderness as a group of about 5 boys. They camp together and learn skills for about 5 days. Then all the boys go on what's called a solo, where we camp alone, about a mile apart from each other for 3 days. Obviously, since it's the 21st century, we are given walkie-talkies and a map of other campers in case there's an emergency. Even if that doesn't work, we're basically in screaming distance from one another, and the camp leader makes regular rounds around the perimeter of our campsites. It's supposed to be fail-safe, no liabilities. But something happened. Let me first give you a rundown of our group. There was me, my friend Caleb, his friend Marco, and 2 brothers named Brian and David. Those 2 I didn't know that well. Our leader Nick was also with us. Nick was relatively new. This was only his 2nd expedition. The first 5 days went without a problem. It was just normal camping. On the last day we were together as a group, that's when it started. We were all in our makeshift tents, Nick in his bigger and more advanced canopy farther away, and we heard a rustling in the leaves. Big deal, right? That's what we thought too. Brian woke up first. He was the most skittish of the group. I assume he only went because his brother was going. And then he woke up his brother. Them talking woke the rest of us up, and then Brian told us what was up. Obviously, we laughed at him and thought that he was just messing around or being scared. And then, we heard it. The majority of us being people accustomed to the woods and its noises brushed it off. Even after what I've witnessed, I still think it was just a rabbit. I guess we all had trouble going back to sleep after that. So partly to pass the time, and partly to scare Brian, we told horror stories. I don't remember the specifics. I guess I'm just too rattled. But I remember the outline of one that Marco told, mostly because of how it affected what happened later on. It was about a boy who went to wander the forest. One day while walking, he heard a scream coming from the further end of the forest. Coming closer to it, he saw nothing. He finally went to the exact spot the noise seemed to be coming from. He found nothing. Turning back confused and a little creeped out, he saw a wolf. Going up to pet the wolf, I don't know why he would, but a teenager made up this story, so whatever, it suddenly bit him and started screaming. The boy then transformed into a wolf much like that one, and was doomed to lure people into his clutches for the rest of his days. Very bad story if you ask me. After he finished telling it, Marco seemed to scream trying to scare Brian, but at that point, we were all just annoyed. After those 5 days, I was really excited because my most favorite part was here, the solo. We all went out alone, ready to face the woods. The camps were aligned in a straight row from east to west, with each camp being a mile apart, and Nick being in the center. From east to west it went, me, Marco, Brian, Nick, Caleb, and David. The first day was one of the best days of my life, despite what happened that night and morning. I caught a rabbit, cooked it, ate it. I went fishing, climbed a tree, and bathed and drank from a river. I was a real woodsman. Then, it all went to shit. I don't know when the killing started, or if anybody was even killed, but for me, it started that night around 1 a.m, if I was looking at the moon right. I went out to take a piss in the stream when I saw a rabbit wounded on the ground. I thought I could save the trouble of getting my next meal, so I took up my knife and walked ever so slowly over to it. Knife in hand, I creeped over it until I could hear it breathing and plunged my knife down, then felt on my lower leg. The rabbit, as injured as it looked, fucking got away before I slashed it. Luckily for me, I didn't stab myself directly in the leg. I just cut it on the side. There wasn't too much blood, but it was hard to walk. I kind of semi-crawled back to the campsite and radioed Nick. No response. Shit. I had disinfectant with me. I'm not an animal, and the cut wasn't deep, so I knew I wouldn't die or anything. It didn't look like it needed stitches either, so I decided just to wait until morning. I assumed Nick was probably just asleep. I didn't bother radioing the other guys. They couldn't help me. I decided to go to sleep, so I turned my walkie off, another dumbass horror movie on my part. As I tried drifting to sleep, I was awakened by a scream, and I instantly recognized it. It was Marco. And guys, I know you'll be angry and annoyed when I tell you what I did when I heard that scream. I did nothing. But let me explain. Maybe it was my sleepiness or my wound, but I did not think it was a real scream. I thought that since Marco's tent was right near Brian's and that he was trying to scare Brian or something. It was a shitty move, I know, but I couldn't have helped him anyway. I was in no condition to run a mile to go get him. And neither was Brian, because Brian was either scared or Brian was dead. I really don't know at this point. About an hour later, I was still awake. I tried to play it off before, but the pain in my leg was unbearable. The wound was screaming, and I just couldn't deal with it. It was hell. I knew I wasn't going to die or anything, but I couldn't stand the pain at this point. Again, maybe it was the sleep deprivation or the pain, but I decided to go to Nick's camp. I knew he had painkillers in case of an emergency. Earlier, I had gathered sticks to make a fire, which I didn't make, and I grabbed the biggest one and used it as a makeshift crutch. I specifically went around Marco and Brian's campsite because I didn't want to wake them, and I had a pretty good idea of where I was. I heard the average noises in the woods, leaves crunching, wind blowing, but nothing scared me. I needed those painkillers. I kind of tuned out in the middle of my walk. It's mostly a blur now. I remember it was long, and I remember it was painful, but I especially remember getting to Nick's cabin, and I remember his body. The funny thing is, I saw the painkillers first. I think I was dully aware that there was no sound in the cabin when Nick snores like a bear, but I guess in my delirium, I didn't notice or care. I gulped down the pills, and even though it didn't take effect right away, I felt better. Then, I noticed the steady silence that washed over me, and before I saw him, I knew he was dead. His body, it wasn't something any animal could do. I don't think it's something any human could do either, not without heavy machinery. In fact, there wasn't really even a full body there. He was torn to shreds. There was a pool of blood and a pile of mushed up meat. Like if you've ever had made meatloaf, he looked like the meatloaf mix with the milk, eggs, and raw meat all mixed together by hand. He looked like human jello. Not screaming, not even feeling that panicked. I just stared at his body for a few minutes. Then I realized I needed to get the fuck out of there. I wasn't close to Nick. There was no time for mourning. I wasn't really close to any of these people. The closest thing I had to a friend was Caleb, and we only met in the training program. I'm a survivalist, so that's what I did. I survived. Call me an asshole, but I needed to get out of there. Quickly thinking, I took Nick's radio, flicked it on, I heard David's voice screaming for,
"Please help, oh God, please help, it's coming, please help, holy shit, please no!"
I flicked it on to a different channel while scouring the woods. If it hit Marco and it's on to David, it's moving west, I thought. I immediately flicked on to an emergency frequency and told them where I am. I moved east, that's all I remember. Like my trip to Nick's, it's all a blur. Everything is. First, I was heading east. Then I was in a police cruiser. And then I told them what happened, not holding back, but I should have. They told me they would contact my parents, and that I should wait in his office, where I'm sitting at now. A few minutes before I started writing all this down, about 6 men in suits came in here asking for me. I overheard them talking to the sheriff about me. They're trying to take me. They said how this matter was a matter of national security. I don't know if I'm getting out of here or not. The painkillers are wearing off, and man, it'd be nice to have one right now. I guess that's the end. Do what you want with this story. Brush it off as a nice little horror story and go about your life if you want. I'm real. I hope at least I'm remembered. I guess now is goodbye. Sorry, I don't have all the answers. Hi. For those of you who read my last post, this is a partial explanation. At least, what I've found so far. So, I'm back home now. But I don't have all the answers. As some of you suggested, I just played stupid for a lot of the questions they asked me. I didn't reveal what I didn't think was human. I just said I heard screaming and thought I saw a body. They asked me if I smelled anything weird. I said no. I just thought it was odd that they asked me that, so I put that in there. The men in suits that were there either are running this behind the scenes or were sent away, because I haven't seen them since. The police wouldn't tell me anything, but I figured out some information. So, from what I know so far, there is some kind of monster or alien or serial killer of high priority that attacked my campsite. I know it's high priority from the men in the suits. I saw them flash their FBI badges. I assume it's not a serial killer, because I don't know how we could have mashed up Nick's. I still don't know if that was Nick, but I still assume it was his body like that, without some kind of machine that I would have definitely heard. I don't think a normal animal could have done that, so it must have been something supernatural. I don't really believe in that stuff, but I think something had to have done this. I never actually saw the thing, and I kind of want to now. I assume that it's good at keeping quiet, because I heard no noises that weren't human. They kept me in that office for a good 2 hours, and luckily I deleted the browsing history after I wrote that story, because they came in there and unplugged it and asked me, "Did you go on this?" And I obviously said no. I asked one of them if there was a police report I could read, and she dismissed me immediately. The police called my parents, and they took me home. But before they could, they had a long talk with them that I couldn't overhear. When we got home, my parents told me that we couldn't talk about it to anybody and try to forget the whole thing. I asked if I could see any of the boys in my group. They said no, I'm not allowed to. I don't really know what's happening. Whenever I ask my parents about anything, they just say, "I know it's hard, but we're not talking about this." After that, they wouldn't even respond if I would ask them. I feel like the whole world is crazy. I checked out all the news sites about this and came up with nothing. Nobody seems to know about it. I was contemplating contacting the local news, but I thought it would make things worse, and obviously I'm not allowed to tell anybody. From now, I guess, I'll just try to go about my normal life. But it's gonna be hard. I'm thinking about going back into the woods to investigate, and even went up to it, but there was police tape surrounding the entire perimeter of that area. I didn't do it, but I'm wondering now if I should have gone under and seen the site. I don't expect they'll keep the police tape up long, really. That will cause suspicion. My leg is doing better. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow. My mom told me if the doctor asked what caused the wound, I should say I was cutting the garden and accidentally cut myself. I tried to call the Outward Bound people, but they said they had no record of my camp group, or of anything of Nick in their database. So I don't really know what to do now. I essentially have no proof of what happened besides my word. I can't even find any of the application papers to join Outward Bound. I don't even have any of the boys' phone numbers or Nick's. How I don't even know any of their last names. I really don't think I can prove any of it, no matter how much digging I do. I feel guilty that I left them all behind, but with my injury, I might have gotten killed too. And one death is better than two, I guess. Honestly, I don't even know if any of them are dead. This is all very confusing, and I don't know whether I should just keep my head down and forget about it, or if I should expose this cover-up. I think the people have a right to know what's happening, and I think I especially have a right to know, since I was involved. What scares me the most is whatever is going on in this forest. If this some kind of monster, I'm a little skeptical on that. How are they going to capture it? Am I safe with my house being right on the edge of the woods? Does it somehow have my scent or whatever? Even though I hate that somebody is trying to cover this up, I really hope they succeeded in catching whatever did this. Do you guys think I should go back in the woods? I think any kind of evidence would have been taken away by now. I don't want to risk getting caught, and maybe being in actual danger. I'm really glad this site exists, so I could at least share my story. I really didn't expect anybody to believe me, because why would you? I hope this is the last story I have to tell, but I'll come back if there's more. I promise. I know one thing for sure though. I definitely don't want to be a survivalist anymore.